Let's step through the variables lab. So over here, I'm going to have to create a new project in my IDE, and I like to use code blocks. And the documentation has all the information that you'll need for it. But let's look at this. So there'll be two files to turn in, the recipe file and the student file, because there are two different lab parts here. And down here, it has steps on how to create a new project in Visual Studio and in code blocks. So I'm going to create a new project in code blocks here, choose an empty project. I'm going to put it in here, and we'll say this is variables lab. And OK to that. And then I need to make a new file. So file, new empty file, main.cpp. It should be in debug and release. What that means is not super important at this point. And here we go. We have a blank code window. So some of the labs will have code that you can download and start with. Some will have some written code that you can type out to start with. Since we're just starting out with variables here, it's good to kind of get a feel for how to write the first set of code. So I'm going to include IOStream. This is to do input and output using namespace std. This is the standard C++ library. And we're going to create int main, the entry point to our program. And I could type out these comments if I want. Maybe I can just copy paste these, and we can use these as kind of a roadmap. So first, step one right here is to declare the different variables for the ingredients, and I have all the ingredients listed out here. We're going to create a like a float for each one. We have cups of butter, cups of sugar, and so on. If you don't remember how to create a variable, I have some information in here as well. So we're going to create float cups of butter and initialize it to 1. Cups of sugar to 1. We'll use a float for eggs as well, because sometimes in some cases you might want half an egg. So we want to use a float for that reason, not an integer. An integer would store whole numbers only. A float, or if you're familiar with other languages, they tend to use doubles, but a float is something that can have a decimal point with it. Baking soda, teaspoons salt, cups flour, cups chocolate chips. So there are all of the variables that we need. And sometimes if these are all kind of here together, I like to, make them nice to read looking, but you don't have to do this. This is just kind of my style. Okay, step 2, display the ingredients to the screen. So we could do a cout statement with each of the ingredients, but if we do just that, it'll just output the numbers. The user is not going to know what's going on with this. So we can start with that, cups of butter, and I'll put an end line at the end. And if I just put all of these in here, we're just going to see a big list of numbers. And if I weren't the programmer of this program and I were just running it for the first time, I would have no idea what's going on. So I'm going to go ahead and build succeeded, run, and then I just have a bunch of numbers. What do these numbers mean? I don't know. So the concept, user interface design. We need to make sure that when we run the program, it's clear what it is doing. So in this case, we're outputting all of the ingredients. Let's also output a little label next to each ingredient. So this right here is a string literal. It's in double quotes. If I wanted to hard code some text into the program, I would put it in double quotes as a string literal. This right here is outputting the variable itself. It is not in double quotes. And so with the cout statement, console out, and the stream operator, I can keep linking string literals together with variable values and so on. And I can add as many end lines as I want. So I'm going to display up here, I'll say ingredients, even though that's not in here, but you can see it here, ingredients list. So I have cups of butter. I could do sugar, cups of sugar, and then cups, or I could do cups of butter like that. If I run this, I'll have cups of butter here, but the rest of them still need to be filled out. It's up to you kind of how you want to display these. So I'm going to kind of space these out again so that I can have everything kind of nice looking in the code, even though adding spaces here isn't going to add spaces into the program. Only whatever's in that string literal. So I have space cups of butter. Because if I didn't have a space here, it would be 1 cups of butter, and that doesn't look nice. So we have this. We'll do cups of sugar, eggs, and I have to make sure to put a stream operator before the end line here. Teaspoons vanilla, teaspoons baking soda, teaspoons salt, cups flour, cups chocolate chips. So these now will be displayed to the screen like this, but that's not all we're doing for this program. So next we need a variable for batch size. Going to be called batch size, just make it a float, and we're going to ask the user how many batches to make. So in some cases they might want a double batch of cookies, like make double the cookies with the ingredients, or they might want to make a half batch or something like that. So we can get the user input with the cin statement and use that input stream operator to go into batch size. However, at the moment this will run and then it'll just sit here. It's waiting for my input, but the user wouldn't know that. They would just think that the program has stopped for some reason and wouldn't know what to do. So again, this is kind of bad interface design. Anytime we're asking the user for some input, we should probably output something to the screen to tell them what we're expecting. How many batches? And now I can run this and it says how many batches, and I can type in something. I also don't really like how smushed together this is, so I'm going to add some end lines in here. So now that it's a little bit more separated, it's easier to read. Step 5 is we're going to recalculate the ingredient amounts. So we have our ingredients up here, but we're going to make it, we're going to offset it by those batches. So if they wanted 3 cups of flour originally but want to do a half batch, it's going to be 1.5 cups of flour, or 1.5. So for each of these, all of these ingredients here, I'm going to go ahead and copy these. And I don't need the numbers on this side because we already have the ingredient amounts, the original amounts, stored. But I do want to change these. So if we take cups of butter is equal to cups of butter times the batch size, that will take whatever the original amount was. It's currently storing 1 times the batch size. So if they wanted a double batch, it'd be 1 times 2 to get 2 cups of butter for the new recipe. And here we can have cups of sugar, eggs. So we're reusing the same values that we stored before, but we're going to multiply each of these by the batch size to get the new amount. So we can do this. And again, I like to make everything aligned. Not that you have to. This might make it harder to read, but I'm just showing that everything is being multiplied by the batch size. So original cups of butter, blah, times the batch size. If it's a half amount, then it's 0.5 times 1 is 0.5. So finally, we're going to display the ingredient list again. So we can just copy paste this again down here and maybe say like adjusted ingredients list. adjusted ingredients list. So if I run this, we have the original. Maybe I want to make 30 batches. So now here's the adjusted ingredients list. Okay, so, and the example output, yours does not have to match exactly as mine here. Like for instance, I'm displaying the ingredients list here, and then the batches, and then the adjusted ingredients list. You could do both. You could comment this part out and then just ask how many batches. You'd probably want to say how many batches of cookies, but this right here is fine. Okay, the second part of this lab is getting student information. So I'm going to create another project, empty project, variables lab part 2, and I'll create another file. I named the other one main.cpp. It should have probably been called recipe.cpp, but I always end up naming these main.cpp, so I'm going to copy this stuff and then erase everything in main. So we're in student.cpp now. We're going to need the string library as well, though, because we're going to work with strings. So make sure you have that in there. I have a note here to remember to put strings in there. So we will declare and initialize variables for the first part. Let me just copy these comments again. So declaring and initializing variables, we need a string variable for email. We're going to initialize it to student@jccc.edu. We need a character variable for grade and initialize it to A. So characters, a character literal is in single quotes, and a string is in double quotes. So make sure you keep those straight. That's not true in every programming language, but it is here in C++. Float GPA is 3.50. Int semesters completed is 2. And bool degree seeking is true. So these are just some basic student information. Next, we will display those to the screen as is. So cout student information, cout email, and then we'll add some spaces in there and output email. So I've put spaces inside of this string literal, so that will space that over. We want to do grade, GPA, semesters completed, and degree seeking, and then I'll just update these labels. If I can type. GPA and grade. So then again, I'm going to kind of make these all line up so that in the program it looks good. There are other ways to align text in C++, but we're not going to get into that. The easiest way is just to make sure you have enough spaces and they're all the same. So we'll get into more sophisticated text alignment another time. Okay, so it displays information about the student, then we have the student update their information. So next part, update student info, and we'll just have them enter each of those items. So cout, enter email, cin, email, cout, enter grade, A, B, C, D, or F, cin, grade, enter GPA, cin, GPA, enter semesters completed, cin, semesters completed, and enter degree seeking. 1 is yes, 0 is no, and degree seeking. So another thing to note is even though these are all spaced out in the code, they're not going to be spaced out here. So as I enter these, they all show up side by side. Then finally we display the information again. So we will put that here, and updated student information. So this whole exercise is just to see we're inputting different data types. We're initializing these data types to things up here. They each have their own kind of form, and then we are outputting them. So enter email. Let's B 3.4, whatever. That's not really actually my GPA. So then it would have more information. And this isn't spaced out, so I'm going to just add this here. That's not my GPA either. So then here's the updated student information down here. Okay, so, and then there's a little bit of information about compile errors, but you can usually try to do a search for any compile errors you come across. Probably the most common things will be missing semicolons, or the wrong stream operator here, or trying to put a ends line at the end of a CN. That's kind of common. Or possibly forgetting a stream operator altogether in a spot. So, okay, that is the variables lab. And then after all of this, you can turn in these two files, student.cpp and main. Well, this would be recipes.cpp if I had named it properly. So,